Savvy and Company Real Estate. And today I want to talk about historic homes and how we upfit these homes to meet our modern day ways of living without destroying their distinctive charm and characteristics. And I couldn't think of a better person to ask than Jessica Hindman. You guys are in for a treat. I serve on the Historic District Commission with Jessica Hindman, an incredibly gifted architect who is the owner of Studio H Home Designs. And Jessica focuses primarily on historic homes. She has a wealth of information and experience pertaining to this particular subject. And so, welcome, Jessica. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Kim. I'm so happy you invited me here to do this. This is great.
Perfect. Thanks for taking the time. I just want to jump right into it, if it's okay with you, and ask, why historic homes? Whenever I talk to people who have ever worked on a historic home, they say, oh my gosh, it's incredible, it's insane, it's difficult work. So why have you chosen to focus on historic homes?
Well, historic homes are a labor of love, and like everything, it's a circuitous journey, right? I grew up in downtown Baltimore. Downtown Baltimore has one of the most beautiful, cultural heritages of historic fabric in the town. And the Baltimore row house is one that we consider a typology in the United States, and people study Baltimore for this, specific typology. And I grew up going to my grandfather and his sister's row homes all the time when I was growing up. They're beautiful places. They're gentrified now, but it was workforce housing then. And so that was really the environment that I grew up in. And then, and I went to college for engineering. I come from a family of engineers. And after college, I worked for a major construction company in Washington, D.C. And I knew at that point I wanted to go to architecture school for grad school, but I was sort of getting ready to go to grad school and saving up. And I fell into these two exceptional field assignments in Washington, D.C. I worked on the restoration of the Omni Shoreham Hotel in Rock Creek Park, which is, where many inaugural balls have been held and the IMF meets every year. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous historic landmark property. And then after that, I was assigned to the restoration and renovation and addition of the U.S. Botanic Gardens on the Mall. It's right at the foot of the Capitol. And it was just some of the most fascinating work that I ever could have been presented as a 20-something, particularly with regard to the historic qualities of it. The Botanic Gardens is it's a historic aluminum greenhouse, and we don't have aluminum greenhouses anymore. And so the kind of crafts people that we had to find to work on that project were just, exceptional. So that's how I fell into historic. It was always an interest, and it was something that I grew up with, but those were the two things that really led me in this direction.
Well, I have to say, living in an historic district in Wesley Heights, it is part and parcel as a result of my experience living in Charlotte. I am a Charlotte native. I am the needle in the haystack. And a lot of my family lived on the west side of Charlotte. So I grew up on the west side watching it evolve. And so when it was time for us to purchase our home, it was just kind of, just a no-brainer for us to move to the west side. And both my husband, Tim, and I love historic homes. We think not only that they're incredibly beautiful, but we love the history that goes along, that's baked into the walls. We love the locations. I tell a lot of my clients who are interested in historic homes in Charlotte that these are known as the streetcar suburbs. Everything took place right in what we call Center City now. That's where people lived and worked. And with the invention of the streetcar, then they were able to move out to the burbs. Wesley Heights, Dilworth, Wilmore, Fourth Ward. So those were the burbs at the time. And now these are, they're considered urban chic places to live. And so we love our home, and we've said that we would never, ever leave our home. And then, Jessica, we had a baby. And all of a sudden, our a little under 2,000 square foot house didn't feel so big. And so I talked to a number of people, neighbors and clients, who just want to know how you take a historic home, and when you've come to that fork in the road and you need a little more, how do you renovate a home without destroying its charm, its distinctive characteristics, its story?
Well, I think you landed on it, right? I think it really has to do with the story and the narrative, right? And when we start, we of course go through an interview process with homeowners, and that's very much, it's us interviewing them as much as them interviewing us. And we talk a lot about our methodology. And I have found in all of these years that if people really love their home, and if they fundamentally love more than half of their home, then it's a great candidate for a renovation, right? So, many of the features are predictable, right? Storage, an ensuite master bathroom, a kitchen renovation so that the kitchen is more open to the rest of the house, retaining the life on the street because that's so important to these historic neighborhoods, but also having some connection to your backyard as your children grow. And so when we look at those things and we look at these homes and we're talking about, turn of the 20th century bungalows and picturesque cottages, there are a lot of features inherent to these types of homes that do lend themselves to contemporary patterns of living, which is how our historic district commission mission statement is written. And so I think that the challenges in these projects are not as insurmountable as they seem.
So what do you think some of the challenges are?
Well, I think finding craftspeople and general contractors that have experience working in historic homes is a really important thing to address. These homes were built, at a different time with different materials and with different building science than the way we build homes today. And much of that is predictable if you have experience working in them. We very regularly in the Historic District Commission meetings talk about the difference between old growth wood and new growth wood. And that is literally where we get the tag phrase, old bones, good old bones in these houses, right? Old growth wood has completely different structural qualities than conventionally milled wood that we use to build houses today. So the houses are strong. They're very strong, right? But also some of the building science and methods were completely different, right? And so we sized foundations completely differently. And the soil conditions are different everywhere we go, right? So we have unforeseen conditions with soils. The foundations typically require a lot of work. And that's hard because when you're trying to be a good steward of someone's emotional and financial investment in their home, something like foundation repair is really it's a cost that you don't see the benefit of, and it's quite substantial. And we really, are programmed to think of these costs in terms of the, linear feet of countertops and the cabinets and the cost of our plumbing fixtures and our electrical fixtures. But there are predictable things in these old houses, and when we get them right, they'll stand for another 200 years, right? But we have to do them. Some of the other challenges are, sustainability issues. We live in the South, and we have these houses were built during a time when we didn't have conventional HVAC systems, right? And so the way that we expected to bring natural light and cooling and heating systems into the house is completely different than what we have access to today. So we talk about sustainability measures, like, the heat gain and loss through your roof is really the most substantial portion of it. And so if we're doing a project on a house, before we talk about, the HVAC systems that we're going to use in a house, we're going to talk about how your roof is insulated and how we're handling condensation in your roof in a 100-year-old roof. And so a lot of it is, the beauty of the architecture, but a lot of it is building science and building methods and how those have changed over the years. So other challenges that we confront, the kitchens at these times were cut off from the house. The cooking was something that still took place in secret in these homes when they were built. And so, you know, you have children, I have children, we want to be around our kids, and we're both working moms, and the little bit of time that we get to spend with our children is often when we're cooking, right? And so this is a project we have to do often, opening them up. But I think there's also a lot of data on, you know, the pros and cons of the open floor plans that we've seen unfold over the recent decades. And so we talk about, you know, what architectural methods are effective in accomplishing the goals of, you know, visual access to the rest of your family and spaces where we can hang out together, entertain together, right? Without compromising the soul and the comfort of the proportions of these spaces. And so that's an important one too. Did I miss any? I know we've talked about this before.
Well, I need to know how you prepare your clients for this challenge, because I have to say we're having work done to our home right now. And, you know, you talk about slow growth wood versus what we have today. We're being very clear with our general contractor that we want to keep as much of the original trim as possible and repair it versus replacing it, right? And so that material is really important to try and maintain whenever possible, but it's also really expensive to do it that way. And I really, you know, I do this for a living, Jessica, and so I was somewhat prepared, but still I felt like if I had an architect like you on my team, I would have been better prepared. So please tell us how you prepare your clients to go through this sometimes long and arduous process.
Well, the first thing I usually tell people is that these projects, they have thousands of decisions, right? And the more of those decisions that we can make on paper, the better, because they're much less expensive to make these decisions on paper than they are to make them in the field. And the better relationship, the working relationship based on a lot of mutual respect that your team has, the easier these things are, because suddenly those thousands of decisions become very intuitive because everybody understands the intent of the homeowner, right? And everyone is capable of advocating for the homeowner when something happens. And so I think that those two pieces are very important. In our office, I will admit that I am a realist. We have conversations very early and very often about budget and scope reconciliation on projects. Those are painful conversations. They're painful conversations in every project, no matter what the scope of the project is. And so we just have them early and often. I never want to get to the end of a project when everyone has put all of this emotional energy, you know, and investment into a project, and it's either impossible or a terrible experience. We just don't want that to happen, right? So we have those conversations really early and really often. When we give sketches to the homeowners at the beginning of the project, there are breakdowns of takeoffs of square footage of the different types of spaces so that, you know, good contractors can give you really valuable feedback at that stage of the process. And then, you know, I think I mentioned before, we like to work with contractors that have experience in old houses because, you know, most often change orders, they're either due to homeowner changes in scope or unforeseen conditions, right? And the types of unforeseen conditions that we see in old houses, for example, the old bathroom floor is typically, has typically lost its structural integrity in an old house. Well, we can predict that that happens every time, and a contractor who has experience in working in old houses, you know, those decades of experience translate to, you know, X-ray vision in the walls, and they understand what's going on in there, and they just have fewer surprises. So they can tell you from the beginning that you're going to be replacing the structure under your bathroom, as an example. So I think that's really, I think a lot of it is expectation setting. I do not expect homeowners to have experience in these types of projects. They are massive investments of your time and your heart, you know, and your money. And the reason that you work with experts in the field is to have them help you navigate it.
So you seem to have a really good grasp on the process and what you're doing. Can you share with us a challenging project you've worked on where in the end you thought, yeah, I did that?
I think old houses, they're all unique and they're all custom and they're all really challenging in different ways. Every site's unique and every home is unique. And, most importantly, every homeowner is unique. That's what makes my job fun. I love those quirks. But the one that, most easily pops to mind is a really fascinating project that we did in Plaza Midwood. It is a turn of the 20th century craftsman bungalow on the plaza. It's beautiful, right? It's an unpretentious craftsman bungalow. And at some point during the wars, it was carved up into a boarding house. And so, the downstairs was fragmented with lots of extra walls, lots of extra doors, lots of extra locks. And the upstairs, the attic had been turned into, bedrooms and bathrooms with doors and locks too. And so the house was really chopped up. At some point, an addition had been added to the back of the house near, the old back porch with the icebox that was, a little bit 70s and 80s. And it had actually really cool windows and really cool light, but, functionally didn't work very well. And so the story of this house is fascinating, right? We can predict what it probably originally looked like, but that had fundamentally changed significantly with this story of it being a boarding house during the wars and probably long after that, based on what was still there. So the upstairs of that home, it had bedrooms and a bathroom and a loft space. And the family's children lived up there. So it was a really fun family to work with. I really enjoyed working with them. And, none of those spaces met building code, and the stairs didn't meet building code, quite frankly. And once we opened that can of worms, you have to do it all, right? So a lot of the exercise upstairs became making those bedrooms and that bathroom and that loft space, work smarter for the family. And a lot of that was, sustainability decisions with how the roof was insulated and vented so that the house worked smarter for the family. Because we really could not carve up those spaces without getting into a ton of expense with rebuilding the stairs, changing ceiling heights and roof configurations. And that's really not what the project was about. The program for this project, the scope really was a very, unpretentious, predictable program, right? It was a master suite and it was a kitchen and it was a mudroom. And that is something that we see a lot, and that's a really reasonable request, right? And so this is a corner lot in the plaza. It had an extra layer of scrutiny on it because in the historic district, those are two front elevations. And in the historic district, we don't like changes to the fronts. The goal of the historic district is to preserve the character of the district. And so it has a lot to do with the context. And, some changes to the front are allowed, but for the most part, the fronts of the houses and what you can see from the street is quite precious, right? And when you have a corner lot, you've got two fronts and you've got a back that's pretty visible too, right? And so, so we really couldn't change much on two of the elevations of the house. And so the downstairs became more of an exercise in how we could use the spaces that were fundamentally working really well in a way that did not add, unnecessary or hidden expenses to the project, and how we could use the spaces that were fundamentally not working well to accomplish these goals. And so the back rooms of the house, which had been carved up into a million different spaces, became a totally reasonably sized master bedroom. It was lovely. We had a very small, bay that we added for the master bed with some windows in it. Two very nice walk-in closets for the homeowners in their master suite. There was an old bedroom from the boarding house that was converted to a master bathroom that was, not a palace, but it was really nicely appointed. The homeowner was a collector of antiques, and she found the most beautiful old dresser that she had converted to a vanity, and we had high windows above it and light pouring in, and it all of it was totally consistent with the house and the character of the district. And but these were really nice spaces. We converted one of those spaces, chopped it up into a powder room that had a really nice, it's around the corner and you're not watching your guests walk in and out of the bathroom all the time. And by the back entrance, a mud room with the washer and dryer and a drop zone for the kids and for charging things. And this house had this kind of funny 70s, 80s addition on the back, had the kitchen in it, and it was a very tight galley kitchen that really didn't function efficiently for even one person. And, now you've got all these people pitching in the kitchen, plus people hanging out around talking to you while you're in the kitchen.
Right.
And so the back series of rooms, we were able to, just make some nuanced modifications to, so that the stairs were opened up, and when the kids came down in the morning, the mom could see them when they rolled down the stairs into the kitchen. That old galley kitchen turned into a really nice home office for her that was set just a little bit away, so that she had a little bit of privacy, but she could still see the street and see her kids coming home and getting off the bus, and her stuff wasn't in plain sight all the time. And the old dining room opened up nicely to the kitchen, so that there actually wasn't much redundancy. They could eat at their dining room table every night very comfortably, right? And it could also be a casual space, and it could also be a formal space. And in that particular house, the family room stayed on the front of the house. So it was a great preservation of all of the stories of that house, right? The original bungalow would have had a lot of life on the porch, a lot of life on the street. That is something we love about Plaza Midwood. The Plaza is an incredible corridor for a streetcar community. And you would have seen activity in those front rooms. And that's still true for this house and for this family. So it works smarter for them from every perspective. I will say we were denied by the historic district on that project the first time through, because, well, I should say, I think we were continued, because we were not allowed to make any changes to a window on the side elevation. And so we designed a very cool feature in the kitchen that was historically appropriate and worked really well with the giant old windows, even though the counters are taller than the sills. And we were all really excited about it. And the homeowner and contractor decided not to build it, which happens sometimes.
Oh. You win some and you lose some.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it sounds like it was an incredible house, an incredible product that you all were able to
Mm-hmm.
to build. And you mentioned the Historic District Commission. There are a lot of review boards, or a number of review boards, that you have to go before when you are renovating a historic home. You want to prep people for what to expect when they come before a board like ours, the Historic District Commission.
Sure. What I always tell my clients, the first thing I tell them is, it's an intimidating process, but at the core of it, you bought a house in the historic district because something appealed to you about this place. And what appealed to you about this place is something that you are fundamentally interested in preserving, and that these guidelines are written in a manner that their intention is to preserve the qualities of this place that are special to people, that make people feel connected to history and connected to each other, because fundamentally the qualities of these spaces have a lot to do with people interacting, right? And so I think when we look at all of us as human beings, right, and with all of the same intentions, it's a whole lot easier and a whole lot less intimidating, right? The next thing I tell them is that, being a historic district in the city of Charlotte it is really hard to get that designation. And the only way to get it is for a astronomical number of the property owners in that district to fight hard for it. So the reason it's a historic district is because the property owners wanted it to be, and the guidelines, they are written by the property owners. They change because property owners demand it. They adapt to the property owners' needs. They are written by and owned by the property owners in the districts. The Historic District Commission, we don't own them. We're just volunteers. We're volunteer civil servants who care to understand them well. And that's it, right? And so I think that helps a lot too. And when we look at all of the decisions we make as, really being consistent with the intention of the district and why I moved there in the first place, these decisions become a lot easier, right? So that's how I prep people for the Historic District Commission. It is a complicated process, and it is a slow process. You know what our backlog looks like. You know what the rigor of the applications looks like. All of that is hard, and it's good to have a navigator. But I think fundamentally what a lot of people don't realize is that the property owners and the commission are really on the same page. So.
Agreed. And I have to say that I think having a commission like ours helps make the product better. And that's what we all want. I have to talk about money. Money is a big part of renovating a historic home. And, often you're faced with either pumping money back into your home to renovate it, or just taking your money and selling your home and going and buying something that's not historic, but might be a lot less expensive. So how do you prep people for the financial responsibility of renovating their home?
Well, I will say it is true that it's more expensive to renovate in the historic district, and that does have to do with materials and craftsmanship, right? But it's not that different an expense if I'm in or out of the historic district, right? And if I'm building or renovating one block outside of Wilmore, it's not that different in cost than one block inside Wilmore. And anybody who's a property owner has already bought into the fact that there are maintenance costs associated with my house, right? If I don't take care of my HVAC system, if I don't take care of the exterior, if I don't get the gutters cleaned, those are gonna compound into problems, right? And so
Right.
those things are all true in the historic district too. And it's not a dramatically different cost, right? I mean, I will say the tree guys you have to use at the historic district might be a little more expensive than the tree guys you can use if you're outside of the historic district, because there is a standard of information that's required by the historic district that some people are better capable of providing, or just more interested in providing, right? Some people just prefer a different line of work. And we have a lot of wood siding. It's not vinyl siding. You do have to paint it every 5-6 years, maybe more often if it's on a southern exposure, maybe less often if it's on a northern exposure. But these are all kind of standard maintenance issues, right? And so I think that's a little bit of a misconception when we get into the historic districts, if I'm being honest about it. But the cost of renovating the historic district, a lot of it is us educating people, right? It's important that we educate people that this house has really good bones, but it might not have foundations, right? And we won't know that until we get into the project, right? Or the house next to you has great soil and you don't have great soil, and we'll find out when we get into the project. And these are old places, but on the other hand, these houses, they have a lot of soul, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of the expense of these homes really is in the location. It's not in the structure itself. And so, I just don't think it's as different as people think it is. We don't allow vinyl windows. We insist on, wood or wood-clad windows. There is a slight difference in the cost of those. I'll be the first to admit there's a slight difference in the cost of those. I don't think the difference is as much as people think it is. And those wood windows, they're going to last you a lot longer than those vinyl windows will. The vinyl windows, there's just not a ton of data on the long-term life cycle of vinyl windows. And so there are some things that, just are, they come along with being in the historic district, but a lot of it, it's the same.
Well, this has been so illuminating. Thank you so much. I hope people have learned that preparation, constant maintenance, and just really buying into being a good steward of these homes is all you really need to have a great relationship with your home and to grow into it. As your family grows, as your needs grow, and as time moves on. Jessica, thank you so much. Before we leave, any last words of advice for homeowners in the historic areas?
Oh my goodness. I would not know where to start. I have always lived in historic homes myself. As an adult, I didn't live in them as a middle schooler, high schooler, and I love them. There's so much soul and spirit to these homes. I feel very connected living in them. I can't imagine not living in a historic home myself. I think the way they live and the distinctive characteristics of these neighborhoods are a lot of what draws me to them. There's so much activity on the streets, and even in a time like this when we're so disconnected by so many things, living in a historic neighborhood is a very it's a very intimate experience, right? Because you're kind of always around your people. You're on your porch. It's a different existence. I love it. I'm a big fan of it. And then I also tell people, if it's not for you, it's not, and that's okay too, right? Because you said, how do you decide if you're not going to do it and if you're going to move somewhere else? I mean, there's a right fit for everybody, and the right fit for a lot of people is new construction, and I totally understand that. I really, really, really do. Um, so yeah.
Well, I'm with you. I love historic homes, and I think during this time of COVID, when we've all been stuck at home, there's this sense of place that we all have, not only within our walls, but within our communities as well. And so, I, for one, think that if you're interested in a historic home, that it's completely worth it. The time, the energy, the effort, the resources that you put into it is so worth it. And I don't know, Tim and I say that we're never leaving our historic home. So I guess we'll be calling you soon. Thank you so much, Jessica Hindman. Jessica Hindman, owner
Thank
of
you,
Studio
Kim.
H Home Designs. And again, one of the incredible commissioners on the Historic District Commission. Thanks so much for taking the time and educating our audience about historic homes.
Thank you. It's always great to see you.